Jakob von Uexküll and the concept of Umwelt. Introduction. A world seen through many eyes. Jakob von Uexküll, a pioneering Baltic German biologist and philosopher of the early 20th century, introduced one of the most intriguing ideas in biology and philosophy, the concept of the Umwelt. The term, which translates from German as environment or surrounding world, does not refer to the objective world as it exists independently of observers. Instead, it denotes the subjective world experienced by an organism. Uexküll argued that every organism perceives and interacts with a unique slice of reality structured by its sensory and motor capacities. This insight stands in stark contrast to the traditional scientific view that reality is a singular, objective domain accessible in the same way to all beings. Uexküll instead proposed a pluralistic world made up of many coexisting realities. Each organism, he said, lives in a bubble of meaning, constructed through the ongoing interaction between perception and action. The implications of this idea are profound, influencing fields such as semiotics, ecology, phenomenology, and even artificial intelligence. The birth of Umwelt, a reaction against mechanistic biology. At the time Uexküll developed his theory, the dominant approach in biology was mechanistic. Animals were commonly viewed as automatons that responded reflexively to environmental stimuli, much like clockwork machines. Behavior was studied as a product of cause and effect, rooted in physical structures like nerves and muscles. This view, while helpful for certain kinds of scientific inquiry, ignored the internal, subjective experiences of living beings. Uexküll found inspiration in Immanuel Kant's philosophy, especially the notion that our perception of the world is shaped by our mental faculties. He extended this idea to non-human organisms, suggesting that each species has its own internal framework that shapes how it perceives and acts in the world. In doing so, he rejected the assumption that animals inhabit a single, objective reality and instead posited that each species inhabits its own reality, its own Umwelt. This philosophical stance was revolutionary. It reframed the study of life by making subjective experience a central concern. Rather than asking what a particular behavior accomplishes in the external world, Uexküll asked what the world looks like from the perspective of the creature exhibiting that behavior. His approach thus combined biology, phenomenology, and semiotics into a unified vision. What is an Umwelt? Uexküll's concept of Umwelt is built upon the idea that animals engage with the world through sensory and motor capacities that determine what they can perceive and how they can act. He divided the Umwelt into two interrelated domains, the Merkwelt, or perceptual world, and the Werkwelt, or action world. Together, these domains define the organism's functional relationship with its environment. Take, for example, Uexküll's famous case of the tick. A tick's entire world is shaped by just three stimuli: the odor of butyric acid, the warmth of a mammal's body, and the tactile feel of skin. These cues are all the tick needs to survive and reproduce. While humans might perceive a rich landscape of trees, animals, and weather, the tick experiences a drastically pared-down Umwelt. It does not need to perceive the full range of reality, only those elements relevant to its biological needs. This leads to Uexküll's central insight: different species live in different experimental worlds. What is real for one organism may not even register for another. Each Umwelt is a structured world of significance, not a chaotic flood of stimuli. This idea encourages a more relativistic and pluralistic view of nature. The functional circle. To explain how organisms navigate their Umwelt, Uexküll proposed the idea of the functional circle, Funktionskreis, which describes the continuous interaction between perception and action. An organism perceives a stimulus in its environment, which leads to a behavioral response. That action, in turn, affects the environment, leading to new perceptions and further responses. This feedback loop is how life is lived. For instance, a crab perceives the movement of a predator, which triggers a defensive action such as burrowing into sand or fleeing. The result of that action changes the crab's relationship with the predator and the environment. This circular relationship between perception and action ensures that the organism is always dynamically engaged with its umwelt. The functional circle also explains how meaning arises in biological systems. A stimulus is not meaningful in itself, it gains meaning only when it is integrated into a perception-action loop. This anticipates later developments in cybernetics and systems theory, where feedback loops are fundamental to understanding behavior, learning, and adaptation. Uexküll thus showed that animals are not passive receivers of information but active constructors of meaningful worlds. Implications in semiotics and biosemiotics. Uexküll's theories laid the groundwork for the modern field of biosemiotics, the study of meaning-making processes in the biological realm. Unlike traditional biology, which often reduces life to chemical reactions and mechanical functions, biosemiotics emphasizes that organisms interpret signs in their environments. These signs can be chemical, like pheromones, auditory, like bird songs, or visual like color patterns in butterflies. In this framework, the umwelt is essentially a semiotic system. It consists of signs that an organism can interpret based on its perceptual abilities and behavioral repertoire. This aligns with the work of later semioticians such as Thomas Sebeok and Jesper Hofmeyr, who saw sign interpretation as a fundamental feature of all life. For example, a flower's color and shape are signs that attract bees. But these features are not meaningful in themselves, they become meaningful only through the perceptual capacities of the bee. In the human realm, we see similar dynamics in language, culture, and art. By tracing meaning back to basic perceptual and functional capacities, Uexküll offered a powerful model of communication that spans from bacteria to humans.